So here is some sample data that we're going to play with here about charts. This data is posted for you guys on Google Classroom for you to look at. And I'd like you to maybe chart along with me as we go through this. So here is this chart that maybe is keeping track of some weather information. We have here the day of the week and the high temperature, the low temperature for the day, the humidity of the day, and the precipitation, the amount of rain that we would have gotten that day in inches. All right. So we want to chart this data because, again, a lot of numbers here. It would be really helpful to maybe put this into a graph. First rule number one about charting data is that your data really does have to be organized well. If we go back to the 4 major rules of organizing a spreadsheet, your data does have to be organized. If your spreadsheet is a mess, the chart's not really going to work very well. All right, so please organize your data first. Make sure it follows the 4 rules. In this case, it does. Each column has its own piece of data. Each day has its own row. There's a level of consistency in here, and the columns have been labeled. So this does follow our rules. All right. First step to want to chart data is we do need to. It's easier here to highlight the data you want to work with. Google can do some of this for you, but just to cover your bases, it's always a good idea to highlight the cells that contain the data you want to chart. Right? So again, I just clicked in the day and then kept dragging and highlighting until I got all of the data highlighted. Right? So this is the data we want to include on the chart. All right. Now, honestly, putting a chart in is really as easy as saying insert chart. Insert chart. And Google's going to go to work. Okay. Now, let's see what Google did. If we look at this type of chart, or the data that we have here, the first question you want to ask is, what type of chart do you think would work best for this? This is looking at especially some weather information over time. And I would like to see what happened over time. This sounds like a really great candidate for a line chart. All right. Now, you'll see that if you're working in Sheets, on the right-hand side, once you start a chart, there's going to be a whole bunch of options that are going to show up here on the right side of the screen. Okay. And a lot of this has to do with what you're seeing on the graph. Right, so we can adjust things if you want to. This is not the be-all and end-all of charts. Okay, I am going to make this chart just a little bit larger. You can increase the size of this chart by using the handles on the outside of the chart. Okay, just to spread things out. Now, you'll notice that Google already looked at this chart and figured out kind of what type of chart it really kind of should be. But let's say you don't want a line chart. There are other things you can do here. First, there are other types of line charts. So if you wanted to kind of change that, you could. You could change it to a column chart or a pie chart or a scatter plot or some of these other wacky charts down here. I would probably go, usually I'll go with what Google suggests, but if you can always override it if you want. And in fact, they even give you some other suggestions here about a couple of charts we're not going to talk about too much. But the line chart's the good choice here. But if you ever wanted to, you could change the type of chart you're working with. Okay. And then you have a lot of other information here just about how the chart is put up. Where is the data coming from? That's this data range over here. Right, so this is the data range over here. That's showing us really where did this chart data come from. And then what information right now is in the x-axis. Right, so here's the horizontal axis here, and the y-axis is the vertical axis here. So like what pieces of data from the chart are shown, right? So they've put the day across the bottom, and then the temperature, humidity, and precipitation on the vertical axis there. Okay. And they've already figured out that row 1 and column A have label information in it, which again is another reason why labeling your data is really important, because it's already using that in the spreadsheet here. So it knows what the values are and it knows what day information to put there. Great. So that's a really quick, easy way of putting graphs in, but now we want to maybe make a couple of changes if we need to. Generally, I find that the easiest thing to do is if you want to change something about your graph, you can look for that information in two places. Either if you look at this customize section over here, here is a lot of the different pieces, parts of the chart, and how you can adjust them. Okay, so I'll just start here with the title, right? So the chart title, that's this title here. So the chart title right here, the chart title is this. If you want to change the chart title, you can change it here. You can change that title right there. The other neat thing you can do, if you don't want to try to look for the item here on the chart editor, is literally if you click on something in the chart, you can now start to edit it. So if I double click on the title, I could now change this title if I wanted to. Okay, so two places you can look to change something. If you find something you want to change, double click it in the chart and it'll bring up its options on the right, or you can poke around and find the options on your own. Okay, I'm not going to really play with the font and everything here of the chart. You can do that. One of the things that I do remember all the time from my science classes that you have to make sure you label your axes. So here's the horizontal axis title. That's that. And the vertical axis doesn't have a title right now, but if you wanted to have a title, we could add a title and it will automatically update the chart for you. Okay, so you can control your titles there. Okay. This part here is called the legend. This will show you a little bit about the particular chart. Some charts it's really helpful to have the legends, and on other charts maybe you don't want it. So here you can decide what position does the legend sit in. This automatically figures it out. Maybe I want to move it to the bottom of the chart. Is that a better place to put it? I don't know. You can again play around. The nice thing about this is that you can kind of poke around and see what works and what doesn't work, and the worst comes to worst is you can just undo it. If you don't want the legend at all, maybe I don't think it needs that extra legend, you can take the whole thing totally out if you wanted to. So you really have a lot of options here. I don't know, I'm kind of digging what it did on the bottom there, or put it at the top. Okay. We can play with the axes, right? So if we can look at the horizontal axis, you can we can talk about the labels if you want to adjust the labels here on the vertical axis here. We can also adjust the label. So really continue to poke around and see what you can find. Let's say I don't really love the color of the humidity line. The humidity line right now is yellow. If you just click on the line, here's information about that particular, they call it the data series. So right now there's the line color right here. I want to change it to purple. We'll make humidity a purple line, right? You can adjust that. We can change its style and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And here is the format for the other data lines if you wanted to. Also, I want the high temperature. I want the high temperature to be in red, and I want the low temperature to be in blue. I don't know. Again, you can decide how you want to format that or you like. All right, so you can poke around in the customize window, or you can just double click the item that you're looking at on the chart, and you can adjust it. Okay. All right. One of the things I'm not, first of all, in love with about this chart is that something just looks wrong. And I want to point out this. Here we have the high temperature. Here we have the low temperature. Here's the humidity reading. And precipitation is on this chart, but if you look, it's way down here at the bottom. Something's not right about that. And here's the problem. We can't really have all this different information on one chart. In reality, on the same chart, I can't chart high temperature, low temperature, humidity, and precipitation all on the same chart. A, it's a lot of information, but B, high temperature, low temperature, humidity, and precipitation all use different units. They're all measured differently. So this axis here, right, we can't really have it show degrees Fahrenheit for temperature, percentage for humidity, and inches for precipitation. You can't really do that on one chart. You really would have to do it in 3 charts. So how can I take this data out if I don't want to chart the whole thing? Well, you could have started when you charted the data. Let's say you only wanted to put the temperature on this chart. You could have just highlighted high and low temperature and the dates and said, please only graph that. But there's an easy way to do that. If you double click on the chart and go back into setup, here are the different data series that have been included on the chart. So if you don't want something, like I want to take the precipitation off, just click on the 3 dots on the right and you can say remove. And it's just going to take it off the chart. It will not include it in the data range. And in this case, let's take off the humidity because we're not going to be able to really put that in there. All right. So now we only have temperature listed on the chart. Great. So pay attention to that. Data series that have different units really can't be put on the same chart. It's just not how that's going to work. One of the things that people like to do, I'm going to come here into the series setup. Let's take a look at the high temperature. Sometimes people like to put in the data points. You see when I hover over here, see all the different circles that show up? Maybe I want to see that. I would like to have that show because maybe it's easier for people to pinpoint exactly where the data is coming from. Right now, the point size is called the data point. There is none on there, but we can turn that on. And now I'm getting dots on my graph. So now this is showing each individual data point that went into that graph. All right. So again, these are things that you might want to do. And again, play with it, poke around in this window, see what you can find. Maybe that's an easier way for people to do that. I think one of the things I saw in here is right. Some people like to put in a label on the line, right? So I don't know, I'm going to add the low temperature labels in here. And unfortunately, it wants to put the day, but I'm actually going to put the actual low temperature reading. So this, whatever day this was, this is the high of 74 degrees and a low of 62. I don't know. Is that something you want to have in your graph? There's a lot of options. Quite honestly, I'm going to ask you to poke around in here, see what you can find, and see what you like to work with. Okay. So there's our chart. First, in a couple of clicks, we were able to make this into a graph. And then from there, you can play with it and adjust it and really get it to the way you want. One of my personal recommendations, quite honestly, is simpler the better. Sometimes with data, we can turn on every option we want on this chart, and this chart's going to get very hard to read. It's actually a lot easier when things are a little simpler. If you find yourself putting a lot of data on the chart, you might want to think about multiple charts and let the user figure it out. Right, so I would probably go for simpler is better is my general thought here. Okay, one of the really nice things about this is that you can now take this chart and do stuff with it. So you can, you can copy this chart. And if you wanted to, copy the chart. And the way I'm recording this, I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but you could copy this and then maybe paste it into a Google Slides presentation that you're doing. Maybe you're writing a report and you want to actually put the chart into the middle of the report. You can open this up, copy it, and then paste it into a Google Doc or a Word document. And now you can bring the chart you created in Sheets and bring it over into other things you may have done, which is really very, very nice. Okay. So if we look down on the bottom of your sheet here, there's sample data 1, sample data 2, and 3. Go to sample data 2. Here's a different type of chart. And now this type of chart, maybe I did a survey and wanted to know how many people, what was your favorite snack? So if we try to chart this, what chart do you think it's going to pull up? Let's see. Insert a chart. All right. So this decided to put this into a bar chart. Great. And we can Continue to play around with that if you'd like. Let's see. So here I turned on the data labels for the series. That's really nice. And again, we continue to adjust this if we wanted to. The other option you have here, I think this also could work. Oh no, I'm sorry, I want set up here. That a pie chart is one of the other very suggested items here, and this is a fantastic way to show this data. Right, so again, poke around, see what you can find. I like the bar chart or the column chart. This is probably a really good use for all of this. And then again, continue to let's play around. And if you wanted to, we could change colors or whatever you're looking for to make this work. Okay. Again, my suggestion, please, here is to go click in your chart, double click the chart, look at all the options, poke around, turn things on, turn things off, see what it does. And then eventually when you start to do more things like this, you'll just know what your options are and learn where to find some of these things. Okay. Let's go to sample data 3 for a moment. Okay. Sample data 3 is asking about, I would like to see, is there a connection between the temperature and ice cream sales? Is there any correlation between them? So we could look at it this way, but it's probably easier to see this on a graph. Okay. So this put out this wacky line chart. And I don't know about you, I don't think this is very helpful, the way this is set up. So let's see what other things they suggest. They've got a column chart, they've got this other area chart, but here's a scatter plot, here's a scatter chart. I like this one better. This, I think, is a much nicer way of showing this data, right? So you can see that when the temperature was below 55 degrees, here was what the ice cream sale was on the vertical axis. All right, let's see if we can turn on some data labels. Okay. And again, we can poke around and play with this a little bit more. One of the things that I like to do on a chart like this is something you may see here. There's an option here for the trend line. The trend line is something that you might see when you, especially in science, you may talk about statistics. We want to see in general, what is the trend of the data? And this is going to almost kind of take an average-ish of all the data and kind of show what the general trend looks like. In statistics, we will call something like this data point here, when it was 57 degrees and we sold $1,000 worth of ice cream. All of a sudden now, it doesn't really fall in line with what everything else is showing us. We'll call this, an outlier. We are almost going to kind of ignore it for a little bit. We're not going to dwell too much on it, but the trend line helps us to see that generally that there is a bit of an upward trend. As the weather gets warmer, we sell more ice cream. In science class, we often talk about relationships between data points. What is the relationship between ice cream sales and temperature? And we can see, well, I don't know if you remember this, one of the terms they use is there is a direct relationship. As temperature increases, ice cream sales also increases. Right. So you can turn on the trend line if that's something you're looking for. So charting data is really pretty simple. First, it starts with a well-organized spreadsheet. You do need to make sure that your data is in a format that's going to work. All right. And then make sure you highlight the data and then insert the chart, pick the type of chart you want, and then you can poke around and look at all your different options. Okay, so that's the nitty-gritty easy part of doing charts. And then in the next activity here, I'd like you to just play a little bit and then be able to collect some data and then be able to chart it.